After my son assaulted me, I packed my things and fled my own house. My daughter-in-law was hosting a party in my backyard with drinks and a barbecue. "She's finally gone. Now we can live free," she was saying happily, while the music was so loud they didn't even notice when the door slowly creaked open. "My name is Eleanor Roberts, and I am 64 years old. I have been a widow for 15 years, since my Lawrence, may God rest his soul, passed away from a heart attack. For 4 decades, every penny, and later every dollar that I earned with my sewing machine in Boston, Massachusetts, went towards building our life and our home. A home that no longer belonged to me, even though my name was still on the deed. It all started to change 3 years ago, when my only son, Robert, 38 years old, showed up at my door with his wife, Michelle, and my granddaughter, Caroline, who was only 5 years old then. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. It was a Tuesday in October, and the air smelled of apples and rain. I was finishing a dress for the neighbor's daughter's baptism. "Mum, we need to talk to you," Robert said, with that expression I knew so well since he was little. The same one he used when he broke something and came to confess. Michelle stood behind him with Caroline in her arms, faking a shyness she had never truly felt. Now I know. But back then, I only saw my son, the woman he had chosen, and my precious granddaughter. I invited them in and made hot cocoa for everyone, even for Michelle, although she always said she was on a diet. It didn't help much, because she didn't even touch it. "The economy is hitting us hard, Mum," Robert began, looking at his cup instead of looking me in the eye. "The real estate company where I worked closed down, and Michelle only gets temporary jobs at the shopping mall. What he didn't tell me that day, what I would discover much later, was that his firing had nothing to do with the economic downturn. Robert had been diverting small amounts of commissions to a personal account for months, which were finally discovered. He didn't go to jail because of his boss's generosity, but his reputation in the Boston real estate sector was ruined. And then there was the other thing, the thing that even Michelle didn't know then, the gambling debts that were piling up month after month. "We can't keep paying the apartment rent, Mum," he continued, now looking directly at me with those eyes he inherited from his father. "We thought we could stay here with you, just temporarily, until we can get back on our feet financially. 6 months at most." 6 months. 3 years later, those words still echo in my head like a cruel joke. I looked around the living room where Lawrence and I had spent so many nights, the sofa where I nursed Robert when he was a newborn, the side table we bought for our 10th anniversary, the walls we painted together, laughing when the paint splattered us. This was my home, built with 40 years of hard work, sacrifice, and love. "Of course you can stay," I replied without hesitation. How could I refuse? He was my son, my own blood. "This house will always be your home too, Robert." How wrong I was. Caroline jumped from her mother's arms and ran to me. "Grandma, we're going to live with you. I get to sleep in the flower room." Her innocence made me smile. The flower room was Robert's old room, which I had redecorated after he moved out on his own. It now had sunflower wallpaper and a matching quilt. "Of course you can, sweetheart," I told her, hugging her. Michelle finally spoke. "That's very generous of you, Eleanor. We promise it will be temporary. You know, just until we get back on our feet again." There was something about her smile that should have alerted me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I was so happy to have my family close, to hear children's laughter in the house again, that I ignored the voice inside me that was telling me to be careful. That night, after they settled into Robert's room, Caroline delighted with the flowers, I sat in my rocking chair facing the window that overlooked the backyard. The yard where I planted apple and cherry trees 20 years ago, where Lawrence built a small fountain for the birds to come and drink. I thought about how the house would be full of life again. No more lonely dinners, no more endless silence. Lawrence, I whispered to the photograph of my late husband that I always carry in my robe pocket. Our boy has come home with his family. I wish you were here to see it. The first few days were almost perfect. Robert went out early every morning, supposedly looking for work. Michelle stayed home, and to be fair, at first she helped with household chores. Caroline and I developed a routine. I took her to school in the mornings and picked her up in the afternoons. Then we would bake chocolate chip cookies together or water the garden plants while she told me about her friends and her classes. "Grandma," she asked one day while we were planting sunflower seeds in small pots, "why don't you have more grandchildren?" The question surprised me. "Well, honey, I only have one child, your dad, and he only has you." "Mummy says I'll have a little brother soon," she said with her 5-year-old innocence. My heart skipped a beat. Michelle was pregnant. Why hadn't Robert told me anything? That night at dinner, I casually mentioned what Caroline had said. Michelle dropped her fork with a metallic clatter against her plate. "Kids," she said with a nervous laugh, "always making things up." Robert looked at his wife with an expression I couldn't interpret then. Now I know it was a mixture of confusion and alarm. "We're not expecting another baby, Mum," Robert clarified. "At least not right now. We need to get financially stable first." Michelle quickly changed the subject, asking about the recipe for the beef stew I had made. I let the matter go, but it was registered somewhere in my mind as the first of many small lies. Weeks passed, and the little things started to pile up. Michelle reorganized the kitchen without asking me, moving my utensils and pots from the places where they had been for decades. "It's more practical this way," she said when I mentioned I couldn't find my mixer. Robert continued to go out every morning, but he started coming back later and later. Sometimes he smelled of alcohol. When I asked him about his job search, he answered vaguely, "There are some possibilities, Mom. Don't worry." The bills started to increase. Electricity, water, gas. Everything skyrocketed. Michelle used the washing machine 3 times a day. She left the lights on all over the house. She took showers twice a day, with the water heater on maximum. "Robert," I told him one day when we were alone, "the electricity bill came, and it's almost $200. It's double what I was paying before." "I'm sorry, Mum. We'll help you with the expenses." But that help never came. There was always an excuse. "This month is tight. We'll pay you double next month. I had to use the money for an urgent matter." My savings, the ones I had carefully accumulated for my old age, began to dwindle. I wasn't rich, but I had enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days if I was careful. Now I was paying for 3 additional people, and my careful calculations were falling apart month by month. Then came the first big change, the one that should have made me set a boundary, but I didn't. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the backyard, pruning my rose bushes, when Michelle approached with a cup of tea. An unusual gesture that should have alerted me. "Eleanor," she began, using my first name as she always did, never Mum or mother-in-law. "I've been thinking. The room where Robert, Caroline, and I are is a little small for all 3 of us." I nodded, not knowing where she was going with this. "And your room, the master, is so big. It has its own bathroom and everything. We barely fit with Caroline's crib, and she's growing. She'll need a real bed soon." I felt a knot in my stomach. I already knew what was coming. "I was thinking we could switch rooms. You could move to Robert's room, and we could move to the master. After all, you're only one person, and there are 3 of us. It would be fairer." Fair. That word burned in my chest. Fair, in my own house. Fair to give up my room, the one I shared with Lawrence for 25 years. The one with the window where the sun comes in every morning, lighting up the portrait of my late husband. But I didn't say any of this. I just nodded again, feeling that if I opened my mouth, tears would come with the words. Sure, I finally replied. You can have the master bedroom. Michelle's smile was triumphant. She didn't even try to hide it. Thank you, Eleanor. I knew you would understand. I'll tell Robert to help me move your things tomorrow. And just like that, without further discussion, I lost the bedroom where I had slept for 3 decades. The place where Lawrence took his last breath one October morning while I slept beside him. The space that connected me most to him. It took me 2 days to move my belongings. Robert helped move the heaviest furniture, but it was clear he did it reluctantly. Michelle was already cleaning my room before I finished taking all my things out. She hung new curtains. She put on new sheets. She erased every trace of me in less than 1 hour. The back room was small, dark. It faced the water heater. You could hear the dripping all night long. It had no closet. I had to put my clothes in boxes under the bed. But I told myself it was temporary, just a few months. They would leave soon, and I would get my space back. Thanks, Mom, Robert said when we finished moving my dresser. This helps us a lot. There was gratitude in his voice, but also something else. Shame, guilt. I wasn't sure. What I did know was that my son had changed. He was no longer the thoughtful boy I raised, the one who always thought of others before himself. Now there was a selfishness in him that I had never seen before. It's nothing, I replied, swallowing the pain. The important thing is that we are all comfortable. 3 months passed, then 6. There were no signs they were going to leave. They never talked about looking for another place. When I asked how the savings for their apartment were going, Robert would change the subject. It's tough, Mum. Everything is too expensive. We need more time. Meanwhile, Michelle started inviting people to the house, her friends, her sisters. They came on Saturdays. They stayed for hours. They drank my coffee. They laughed loudly. They used my mugs. They left everything dirty. I cleaned up after they left. One afternoon, I heard one of them ask, "This house is yours, Michelle?" "No, it's my mother-in-law's, but we live here." The other woman said something I couldn't hear. Michelle laughed. "We'll see, we'll see." Those words kept ringing in my mind. We'll see. What was she planning? Robert started coming home later and later. He would say there was traffic, that he had meetings, that work was difficult. But he smelled of beer. He would arrive with red eyes, with wrinkled clothes. Michelle didn't say anything to him. She didn't seem to care. I took care of Caroline every afternoon. Michelle would say she needed to rest. That being with a child all day exhausted her. She would go out. She wouldn't say where. She would return hours later with shopping bags, new clothes, shoes, makeup. She was spending money they supposedly didn't have. Caroline started calling me Mom. I was the one who fed her, who bathed her, who put her to bed. Michelle got angry. Don't teach her to call you that. I'm her mother. I explained that the girl said it on her own, that I wasn't teaching her anything. But Michelle didn't believe me. She started keeping Caroline away from me. When the girl came looking for me, Michelle would call her. "Come with Mommy. Leave Grandma alone. She has things to do." Caroline would cry. She wanted to stay with me, but Michelle insisted. The girl learned not to look for me when her mother was around. One day while I was sewing in my little room, I heard Michelle talking on the phone in the kitchen. I didn't want to spy, but her voice was loud, and the walls were thin. Yes, it's working perfectly. The old lady let us have her room. It's just a matter of time before we get her to put the house in Robert's name. You know, just in case something happens to her. It's the most logical thing. He's her only son. My heart raced. So that was the plan. They wanted my house, not just to live in it temporarily, but to own it appeared completely. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed staring at the ceiling, listening to the incessant dripping of the water heater, thinking about how I had gotten into this situation. I, who had always been independent. I, who worked for 40 years to have my own roof over my head. Now I was being slowly displaced from my own home by my son and his wife. The next day, I checked my important documents, the house deed, my bank statements, my ID. I kept them in a metal box at the back of my closet. But when I opened the closet, the box was not there. Panic washed over me. I searched the whole room, under the bed, among my clothes. Nothing. Someone had taken the box, and there were only two possible culprits. I confronted Robert that night when he came back from work, or wherever he was spending his days. Robert, my documents have disappeared. Do you know anything about this? He didn't even look me in the eye. I don't know what you're talking about, Mum. My metal box, the one with the house deed, my bank papers. Maybe you moved it and forgot. You know you've been forgetting things lately. It was the first time he had insinuated that my memory was failing. I was 64, not 94. My mind was perfectly clear. I didn't forget it, Robert. Someone took it, and only 3 people live in this house. He finally looked at me with an expression I had never seen on my son's face. Cold. Calculating. Mum, I think you need to rest. You're imagining things. I turned and went to my room, trembling not from fear, but from rage. They were trying to make me doubt my own sanity. I had heard about this. Gaslighting. I never thought my own son would use it against me. A few days after my documents disappeared, I received a letter from the bank. It was a statement for a loan I never applied for. $5,000 in my name with my signature, or something that looked like my signature. I called the bank immediately. Yes, Mrs. Roberts, the clerk told me. The loan was approved 2 months ago. The money is already in your account. But I hadn't seen that money. It wasn't in my account. There must be a mistake, I insisted. I never applied for this loan. I'm sorry, Mom, but we have your application with your signature. Everything is in order. I hung up, feeling the world crumbling around me. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had applied for a loan in my name, and I knew exactly who that someone was. That afternoon, when Michelle went out with her friends and Caroline was at school, I searched the master bedroom while Robert was out. I'm not proud of it, but I needed proof. At the back of a drawer, under Robert's socks, I found my metal box. I opened it with trembling hands. The deed was there, but there was something different about it. It had been tampered with. Where before only my name was listed as the owner, now Robert's name also appeared as a co-owner. It was a crude forgery, but to someone unfamiliar with the original document, it might look authentic. I also found bank statements showing transfers from my account to one I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums. In total, almost $3,000 had disappeared from my savings in the last few months. And then there was the loan document. My signature was there, but anyone who knew my handwriting would know it was false. The money had been transferred directly to Robert's account, not mine. I took pictures of everything with the cell phone that Caroline had taught me to use. I didn't know what I would do with this information, but I needed to have proof. I put everything back exactly as I had found it. And I returned to my room, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid it could be heard throughout the house. That night at dinner, I looked at my son and his wife with new eyes. They were no longer the family who needed a temporary place to stay. They were scammers, thieves, people who were stealing from an old woman, a mother, the person who had given them a roof over their heads when they needed it. "Are you feeling all right, Eleanor?" Michelle asked, noticing my silence. "You're very pale." "I'm perfectly fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." "You should go to bed early," Robert suggested with false concern. "At your age, you need more rest." At my age, as if I were an invalid, as if I couldn't take care of myself, as if I hadn't raised a son alone after being widowed, as if I hadn't worked for decades to maintain this house. "You're right," I said, playing along. "I'll go to bed soon." But I didn't sleep. I planned. I thought about my options, what I could do. I didn't want to report my own son to the police. What mother does that? But I also couldn't allow them to continue stealing from me, manipulating me, slowly pushing me out of my own life. I decided I needed professional help. A lawyer, someone who knew the laws about financial fraud and elder abuse, although I found it hard to consider myself an elder. But how to contact one without Robert and Michelle knowing? They monitored the landline. They controlled the mail. They had even started checking my cell phone when they thought I wasn't noticing. The answer came in the form of my neighbor, Dorothy. We were the same age. We had been friends for decades. She had noticed the changes in my life, how I didn't go out as much, how Michelle seemed to control every aspect of the house. One day, while I was watering the front plants, she approached casually. "Eleanor, I've missed you at our Thursday brunches," she said, referring to the gatherings we used to have with other women in the neighborhood. "Why don't you come this Thursday, like in the old days?" Before I could answer, Michelle appeared at the door. "Eleanor, I need you to help me with something in the kitchen." Dorothy looked at me significantly, then at Michelle, then at me again. She saw something in my expression, something I couldn't hide. "Actually," I said, "it'll only be an hour. You can spare her for an hour, right, dear?" Michelle hesitated, clearly annoyed by the intrusion, but without a reasonable excuse to deny me leaving. "I suppose," she finally replied. "But don't take too long, Eleanor. You know Caroline will be home from school soon." That's how, for the first time in months, I was able to speak freely with someone outside the walls of my domestic prison. In Dorothy's living room, surrounded by her plants and her family photos, I told her everything. The fraudulent loan, the forged documents, the missing money, how they had taken my room, how they controlled every aspect of my life. Dorothy listened without interrupting, her expression changing from surprise to concern and finally to outrage. "This is abuse, Eleanor," she said when I finished. "Financial and emotional abuse. You need legal help." "I can't report my own son," I protested, although I was less and less sure. "It's not about reporting. It's about protecting yourself, protecting what is yours, what you built with Lawrence for so many years." She mentioned her niece, a lawyer specializing in family law and elder abuse cases. "I can ask her to call you on my phone. You can come here to talk to her." I nodded, grateful to finally have an ally, someone who saw what was happening and didn't think I was exaggerating or imagining things. That night after returning home, Michelle interrogated me about what I had talked about with Dorothy. I told her we had only discussed sewing patterns and recipes, the innocuous things she would expect two older women to talk about. She seemed to believe me, or at least pretended to. But the next morning, when I woke up, something had changed. There was a different atmosphere in the house. Michelle was unusually kind, making me pancakes, asking me how I had slept. Robert, who would normally have already left, was sitting at the kitchen table with papers in front of him. "Good morning, Mum," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have something important to discuss with you." I sat down, feeling like I was about to walk into a carefully prepared trap. "We've been thinking," Robert continued, "about your future, about your security. You know, if something were to happen to you." "God forbid," Michelle quickly added with false pity. "We want to make sure everything is in order, that the house, your assets, everything is protected." He pushed the papers towards me. They were legal documents, professionally drafted. At the top, in large letters, transfer of property. "What is this?" I asked, although I knew exactly what it was. "It's just a formality, Mum. To put the house in both our names, yours and mine, as co-owners. That way, if anything happens to you, there won't be any legal complications. I'll be able to take care of everything. And if something happens to me before you," he added with a smile that was meant to be reassuring, "the house would still be yours, of course." I looked at the documents, then at my son. This man whom I once carried in my womb, whom I fed with my milk, whom I raised with love after being widowed. This man who was now trying to steal my home, my security, my dignity. "I'm not going to sign this, Robert." His smile froze. "Why not? It's for your own good, Mum." "No, Robert. It's for your own good, for your benefit. I'm not signing anything." Robert slammed his hand on the table. The noise made me jump. "You're always the same, always distrustful, always thinking we're trying to cheat you. I'm your son, your only son. I'm looking out for you. I'm protecting you. And this is how you repay me." "I don't need you to protect me from anything. This house is mine. I built it. I paid for it. And it will remain mine until I decide what to do with it." Michelle burst into the kitchen. Her face showed fury. "You know what, Eleanor? I'm sick of you, your attitude, your selfishness. We live here. We take care of this house. We pay for things. And you don't even have the decency to secure what will be your son's anyway. You don't pay for anything. I pay for everything. The bills, the food, everything. You just spend. You just take. You just destroy." Michelle laughed, a cruel laugh. "Please, what do you pay with? With your little sewing jobs? With your miserable pension? We maintain this house. We've improved it. If it were up to you, this place would still be a dump." Robert stood up. He moved closer to me. "That's enough, Mum. You're going to sign those papers today. Now." "I'm not signing anything. Get out of my house if you don't like how things are here." Robert froze. He looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. Then his face changed. It turned red. His eyes darkened. "Your house? This is not your house anymore. It's our house. And if anyone is going to leave here, it's you." I got up from the chair. I wanted to get away, go to my room, lock myself in. But Robert blocked my way. "Move, Robert." "I'm not moving. Are you going to sign those papers, or I swear you're going to regret it?" "I'm not signing anything. Get out of my way." Robert pushed me. It was a hard, violent shove. I lost my balance. My back hit the wall. My head hit the tile. I felt a sharp, blinding pain. I heard a scream. It was Caroline. She was standing in the hallway. She had seen everything. "Grandma," she said in a frightened, terrified voice. Michelle ran to her. "Go to your room, Caroline, now." "But Mummy." "Go, I said." The girl ran off, crying. I heard her bedroom door close. I touched my head. I felt something wet. Blood. I was bleeding. Robert was standing in front of me, breathing heavily. He didn't look remorseful. He didn't look worried. He just looked furious. Michelle spoke, Her voice was cold, calm. "Look what you caused, Eleanor. Look what you do. You make Robert like this. You provoke him. This is your fault." "I didn't do anything. You are stealing from me. You are assaulting me in my own house." Michelle shrugged. "No one is assaulting you. You fell, that's all. You lost your balance. You are an older woman. These things happen." "Robert pushed me. You both saw it. Caroline saw it." Michelle shook her head. "Caroline didn't see anything. She's a child. She gets confused. And we didn't see anything either. We just saw you fall. You should be more careful." I understood in that moment that they were never going to admit anything. They were never going to accept what they had done. They could hurt me. They could steal from me. They could do whatever they wanted. And they would always blame me. They would always twist the truth. I went to my room. I locked the door. I sat on the bed. My whole body was trembling. I wiped the blood from my head with a towel. It wasn't a big wound, but it hurt. It hurt a lot. I heard Robert and Michelle talking in low voices. Then I heard them laugh. They were laughing. After what had just happened, they were laughing. I heard music. They had turned on the stereo. They were celebrating. I sat there in silence, thinking. I couldn't continue like this. I couldn't stay in this house for another day. If I stayed, I would end up dead or something worse. They would make me sign the papers. They would take everything from me, and I would be left with nothing. No house, no dignity, nothing. I waited for them to fall asleep. It was almost midnight when I stopped hearing noise. I got up. I took out my bag, the same one I had prepared in my mind for days. I put in clothes, medication, the documents I had hidden, cash. I had about $1,200 saved in cash, everything I had managed to hide without them knowing. I opened my bedroom door slowly. The house was dark, silent. I walked down the hall. I passed Caroline's room. I wanted to go in. I wanted to say goodbye, but I couldn't. If I woke her up, Michelle would notice, and they wouldn't let me leave. I reached the living room. I saw my furniture, my table, my things, everything that had been mine. It wasn't mine anymore. It no longer belonged to me. This house was no longer my home. It was my prison. I opened the front door. The cold night air hit my face. I stepped outside. I closed the door behind me. It was the saddest sound of my life. The sound of leaving behind everything I had built, everything I had loved. I walked down the empty street. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. I had to get out of there before it was too late. My legs ached. My head was throbbing, but I kept walking. I arrived at Dorothy's house. I knocked on the door. I waited. I heard footsteps inside. The porch light turned on. Dorothy opened the door. She was wearing an old robe. Her hair was disheveled. She looked at me. She saw my bag. She saw my face. She saw the wound at my head. "My God, Eleanor, what did they do to you?" She didn't say anything else. She pulled me inside. She closed the door. She hugged me. And there, in the arms of my neighbor, in the arms of the only person who had shown me compassion, I broke down. I cried. I cried all the tears I hadn't cried in months, all the pain, all the humiliation, all the betrayal. Dorothy Chadier took me to her guest room. She gave me clean clothes. She cleaned my wound. She made me tea. She sat with me until I stopped shaking. She didn't ask me any questions. She just took care of me like a sister, like a true friend. I lay down in that strange bed. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. In my head, I only heard Robert and Michelle's laughter. I heard them celebrating. celebrating that I was gone, celebrating that they were finally rid of me. But there was something else, something burning inside me. It wasn't just sadness, it wasn't just pain. It was rage, pure rage. They thought they had won. They thought they had defeated me, that I was a weak old woman who would give up. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let them keep my house, my life, everything I had built. I was going to fight. I was going to take back what was mine. I was going to show them that they had messed with the wrong person, a mistake they would regret. As the sun began to peek through the window of Dorothy's guest room, I made a decision. I would no longer be the victim. I would no longer be the sacrificing mother and grandmother who put everyone before herself. It was time to set boundaries. It was time to stand up for what was mine. It was time to show everyone that Eleanor Roberts was not a woman to be trifled with. With that thought, I finally fell asleep, a plan forming in my mind. A plan that would change our lives forever. I woke up with an aching body. Every muscle hurt. My head throbbed where I had been hit. I got up slowly. I looked around. Dorothy's room was small but clean, cozy, so different from the dark room where I had slept the last years in my own house. Dorothy knocked softly on the door. "Eleanor, you're awake. Come in." She entered with a tray. Hot tea, toast, scrambled eggs. "Eat something, please. You'll get sick if you don't eat." I sat up in bed. I took the cup of tea. My hands were still trembling a little. "Thank you, Dorothy. You don't know how much this means." She sat beside me. "We're friends, Eleanor. That's what we're here for. What did that boy do to you? What did your son do to you?" I told her everything from the beginning, from when they came to live in my house. The slow invasion, the abuse, the fake loan, the papers they wanted me to sign, the shove, the blood. Dorothy listened in silence, her face hardened with every word. "That's abuse, Eleanor. That's mistreatment. You have to report it." "I can't report my own son." "Yes, you can, and you should. He assaulted you. He stole from you. He's taking your house away from you. That's a crime." "But he's my son, Dorothy. He's the only family I have." "He's not your family anymore. Family doesn't do that. Family doesn't hit you, doesn't steal from you, doesn't make you feel like you're in the way in your own house." Her words hit me. She was right. I was still clinging to the idea that Robert was my son, that blood was thicker than water. But blood meant nothing if it came with violence, with betrayal, with contempt. I stayed at Dorothy's house that day and the next. I felt paralyzed. I didn't know what to do, where to go, how to start over at 64. Dorothy gave me space. She let me think. She brought me food. She took care of me without overwhelming me. On the third day, I was sitting in her living room looking out the window, thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. Dorothy came in from outside. She had her cell phone in her hand. Her face was tense, serious. "Eleanor, you have to see this." She handed me the phone. On the screen, there was a photo of my house, of my backyard. But it wasn't my backyard. It was full of people. Long tables with coloured tablecloths, beer bottles everywhere. A smoking grill, balloons hanging from the trees, music. I could almost hear the music from the photo. "What is this?" Dorothy sat down next to me. "My niece sent this to me an hour ago. She says your son and daughter-in-law have been having a party since this morning. That there are a lot of people, a lot of music, a lot of noise." I felt something break inside me. Just 3 days. 3 days since I left. 3 days since they assaulted me. 3 days since I left my house bleeding. And they were already partying. celebrating. She showed me more photos. One of Robert next to the grill with a beer in his hand, smiling, laughing. Another of Michelle with a group of friends, all with wine glasses. Another of the backyard full of people, strangers in my garden, stepping on the plants I planted, using my tables, my chairs, everything. "There's more," Dorothy said, sliding her finger across the screen. "My niece says she heard something strange." She showed me another photo, this time of professional-looking people I didn't recognize. A man in a suit and a woman with a briefcase. "Who are they?" I asked. "Real estate agents," Dorothy replied in a grave voice. "Teresa says she heard them talking about appraisals and potential buyers. Eleanor, I think they are planning to sell your house." The shock left me speechless. It wasn't just a party to celebrate my absence. It was a business meeting. They were trying to sell my house. My house. The one I built with Lawrence. The one I paid for with decades of work. Dorothy showed me a video. The sound was loud. Country music, laughter, shouting. And then I heard Michelle's voice, clear and loud. Finally, we got rid of her. Now this house is ours. Now we can live the way we want. Without anyone watching us, without anyone making things difficult for us. Let's toast to freedom." I heard the sound of glasses clinking. I heard more laughter, more shouts of celebration. The video ended. I kept looking at the black screen. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt it would jump out of my chest. "They're celebrating that I left." My voice sounded strange, distant. "They're celebrating?" Dorothy nodded. "It looks like it. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I know it hurts, but you needed to see this. You needed to know what kind of people they are." I got up. I walked around the room. My hands were clenched into fists. My jaw was tense. Something inside me was transforming. The pain was turning into something else. Something stronger, darker, more powerful. "How long has the party been going on?" "Since 10 o'clock in the morning, according to my niece. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon now. That's 5 hours." 5 hours. 5 hours of celebrating. 5 hours of laughing at me. 5 hours of enjoying my house as if it were theirs. As if I had never existed. As if I were dead. "Eleanor, what are you thinking?" Dorothy's voice sounded worried. I turned to look at her. "I'm thinking I made a mistake." "What mistake?" "The mistake of leaving quietly. The mistake of fleeing like a thief. As if I were the one who was wrong. As if I were the guilty one." Dorothy stood up. She approached me. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to take back my house. I'm going to kick them out. I'm going to show them that they messed with the wrong person." "But how? You don't have money. You don't have a lawyer. They have everything. They have your house, your things, everything." "I have something better. I have the truth. I have the documents that prove that house is mine. I have this wound on my head. I have the bank statements that show I pay for everything. I have witnesses. I have proof." Dorothy looked at me with something in her eyes. Respect, perhaps. Admiration. "You need help. I know a lawyer. A good one. She specializes in family abuse and fraud cases. Call her." Dorothy took out her phone. She dialed a number. She spoke in a low voice. She explained the situation. She listened. She nodded. She hung up. "She can see us today. Right now she has an opening. She says it sounds urgent, that the faster we act, the better. Let's go." I put on a sweater. I grabbed my bag. I put in all the documents I had saved. The copies of the deed, the bank statements, the old photos of my house, everything that could be useful. We went in Dorothy's car. The lawyer's office was downtown, in an old but well-maintained building. We went up to the third floor. The office was small, full of books and files. A woman about 50 years old greeted us. Short hair, glasses, a serious but kind face. "You must be Eleanor Roberts. I'm Elizabeth Vega." "I am. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "Please, sit down. Tell me everything from the beginning." I told her my story again, with more details. I showed her the documents, the photos, the videos that Dorothy had on her phone. Elizabeth took notes. She asked questions. Her face showed no emotion, just professional concentration. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she spoke. "You have a solid case, Mrs. Roberts. Very solid. Fraud, signature forgery, physical abuse, property invasion, unlawful taking. I can help you, but I need you to understand something. This is going to be difficult. It's going to be painful. You're going to have to face your son. Take him to court, maybe to jail. Are you willing to do that?" I was silent, thinking, imagining Robert behind bars, Caroline without a father, Michelle alone. Part of me felt guilt, pain. But then I remembered the shove, the blood, the laughter, the party, the video of Michelle toasting my absence, the real estate agents appraising my house. "Yes, I'm willing." Elizabeth nodded. "Good. Then let's start. First, I need you to sign these papers. You are hiring me as your legal representative. Then we will prepare a lawsuit, and we are going to request a temporary eviction order. With the evidence you have, we can get a judge to remove him from your house while the case is being resolved. How long does that take?" "Normally weeks. But with the party they're having right now, and with your recent injury, we can request an emergency order. We could have it today, in a few hours." "Today?" My voice trembled. "Today, Mrs. Roberts. They are on your property without your permission. They assaulted you. They forced you to flee. They are having a party, celebrating your departure while you are here, homeless, without your things. That's illegal. That's cruel. And a judge will see it that way. Trust me." I signed the papers. Elizabeth made calls. She spoke with a judge, with the police, with social services. She worked quickly, efficiently, like a well-oiled machine. I sat watching, feeling how something was changing, how the power was changing hands. I was no longer the victim who fled. I was the owner, claiming what was mine. After an hour of calls, Elizabeth placed her phone on the desk and looked at me. "Eleanor, before we continue, there's something personal I want to share with you." Her tone had changed. It was no longer purely professional. It was more intimate, more human. "My interest in cases like yours is not a coincidence. 15 years ago, my own mother went through something similar." I looked at her, surprised. I didn't expect this confession. "My older brother, Anthony, developed an alcohol problem after his divorce. He moved back into our mother's house. At first, everything seemed normal. Then he started controlling her finances, isolating her from her friends, even physically intimidating her." Elizabeth took off her glasses and slowly cleaned them. "One day, my mother called me, crying. Anthony had pushed her, and she had fallen, fracturing her wrist. But the worst part wasn't that. The worst part was that when I got to the hospital, she begged me not to report him. 'He's my son,' she kept saying. 'I can't do this to him.'" Her words pierced me. It was exactly what I had said. I respected her wishes. I didn't press charges. 3 months later, Anthony had emptied her bank accounts and mortgaged her house to finance his addiction. When we finally acted, it was too late. My mother lost almost everything. She died 2 years later, I think partly from the sadness and humiliation. Elizabeth looked directly into my eyes. Since then, I have dedicated myself to helping people like you, Eleanor, because I know that maternal love is powerful, but sometimes that love blinds us. Sometimes the true way to love our children is to set firm boundaries, even when that means legal consequences for them. Her words moved me deeply. I was not alone in this. This woman not only understood my case legally, but she understood it emotionally. She had lived the other side of this story. Thank you for trusting me with this, I told her. It helps me see that you truly understand what I'm going through. Elizabeth nodded and returned to her professional mode. Then, let's continue. I've spoken with Judge Ramirez. He knows these cases well. He has agreed to review your emergency request this very afternoon. 3 hours later, Elizabeth hung up the phone. She smiled a small professional smile. We have it. The judge approved the emergency eviction order. We have permission to enter your property accompanied by the police. We can do it right now, this afternoon, during the party. During the party? I repeated the words. Yes, while everyone is there, all the witnesses, all the evidence that they are illegally occupying your property, it's the best time. We'll catch them off guard. They won't be able to hide anything. They won't be able to deny anything. Dorothy took my hand. Are you sure, Eleanor? Are you ready for this? I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set. Soon it would be night. Soon the moment would arrive. The moment to return, to face them, to claim, yes, I'm ready. The lawyer's full name was Elizabeth Vega Montero. She had 20 years of experience in family and property law cases. I've seen cases like yours dozens of times, Mrs. Roberts. Children who abuse their parents, who dispossess them, who mistreat them. And it's always the same. Parents are afraid to act, afraid of being alone, afraid of what people will say. But you are doing the right thing, the brave thing. I don't feel brave. I feel scared. That's normal. But fear doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're claiming something that's worth fighting for. Elizabeth made more calls. She coordinated with the police. We need 2 patrol cars, an eviction order, the presence of a social worker in case there are minors on the property. Yes, there is a child, my granddaughter. She is 9 years old. Good. Then also Child Protective Services, just as observers, to make sure everything is done correctly. Every word she said made everything more real, more concrete. It was no longer just an idea. It was a plan that was going to be executed in a matter of hours. Dorothy squeezed my hand. You're going to be fine. I'm going to be with you. I won't leave you alone. Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. She smiled. That's what friends are for. Elizabeth put the papers in a briefcase. Ready. I'll see you at your address at 6 o'clock this evening. The police have already been notified. The social worker too. Everything is coordinated. You just have to be there, sign whatever is necessary, and let the law do its job. We left the office. It was 4:30 p.m. We had an hour and a half. Dorothy suggested we grab something to eat. You haven't eaten properly in days, Eleanor. You need strength. We went to a small nearby cafe. I ordered chicken noodle soup. I could barely eat. My stomach was tied in knots. Nerves were eating me up inside. You're thinking about Caroline, Dorothy said softly. She knew exactly what was going through my head. Yes, all the time. She's going to be there. She's going to see everything. She's going to see her father being removed from the house. She's going to see me arriving with the police. How do I explain that to her? How do I make her understand that it's not her fault? Elizabeth said the social worker will take care of her. She'll make sure she's okay, that they don't traumatize her more than necessary. But she's already traumatized, Dorothy. She already saw her father hit me. She already lives in a violent environment. That's why it's important for you to do this, to get her out of there, and to show her that abuse is not tolerated, that there are consequences, that women don't have to put up with it, and neither do grandmothers. She was right. This wasn't just for me. It was for Caroline, too, to teach her that she deserved to grow up in a home without violence, without shouting, without fear, even if that home no longer included her father. We finished eating. Dorothy paid the bill. I wasn't hungry, but I had eaten enough not to pass out. I needed to be strong. I needed to be clear-headed. This was the most important thing I had done in years, perhaps my whole life. We got in the car. Dorothy drove slowly. We arrived at my street at 5:40 p.m. We parked 3 houses before mine. From there, we could see. The party was still going on. There were still people. There was still music. There was still laughter. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt it was going to explode. I took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. Dorothy glanced at me. "Do you want to wait in the car? You can come out when the police arrive." "No, I want to see everything. I want to be present from the beginning." At exactly 6 o'clock, the first patrol car arrived. It parked in front of my house. 2 police officers got out. An older man, a younger woman. Another car arrived behind them. It was Elizabeth. She had more papers, a briefcase, a serious and professional face. A third vehicle arrived, a white SUV. A woman with a folder got out of it. The social worker. Elizabeth saw me in Dorothy's car. She signaled to me. It was time. I got out of the car. My legs were trembling. Dorothy got out with me. We walked towards the group. The neighbors were starting to come out of their houses to watch, to whisper. They knew something was happening. Elizabeth introduced me to everyone. "Mrs. Roberts, this is Officer Ramirez. This is Officer Torres. And this is Ms. Sanchez from Social Services. They are all here to support you, to make sure everything is done according to the law." Officer Torres spoke. Her voice was firm, but not cruel. "Ma'am, I need you to confirm that this is your property, that the documents are in order, and that the people inside do not have your authorization to be there." "Yes, this is my house. It is in my name. I have the deed here. And they came in with my permission years ago. But now they have assaulted me. They have stolen from me. They have forced me out. I don't want them here anymore." "Understood. We will proceed. Stay back with your lawyer. We will handle it. If there is resistance, we will withdraw and call for backup. But generally, when they see the patrol cars, they cooperate." I nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. The 4 of them walked towards my house, towards the front door. I stayed back with Dorothy. My heart was racing. I could hear the music from outside. Voices, laughter, oblivious to what was about to happen. Officer Ramirez knocked hard on the door. 3 dry knocks. The music continued. No one answered. He knocked again, harder. "Police, open the door." The music volume lowered. I heard footsteps. The door opened. It was Robert. He had a beer in his hand. His face was red from alcohol. A smile on his lips. The smile vanished when he saw the uniforms. "Good evening. I'm Officer Ramirez. We have a court order. I need you to step outside and allow me to enter." Robert froze. "What? An order for what? From whom?" Elizabeth stepped forward. She showed the papers. "A temporary eviction order issued by Judge Morales. This property belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Roberts. You and your family must vacate immediately." Robert saw me then. I was standing in the street behind everyone. His face changed. Surprise, then anger. Mum, what did you do? What the hell did you do? Michelle appeared behind him. What's going on, Robert? Who are they? She saw the patrol cars. She saw the officers. She saw me. Her face turned pale. This is a mistake. This is our house. We live here. You can't kick us out like this. Elizabeth spoke in a calm but firm voice. This property is registered under the name of Eleanor Roberts. She has the legal right to request your eviction, especially after having been a victim of physical assault and fraud. We have documentation of everything, including the loan you applied for in her name, without her consent. That's a lie, Michelle shouted. She authorized that loan. She lives here. We take care of her. You can't do this. Officer Ramirez intervened. Ma'am, I need you to cooperate. This is a court order. If you do not comply voluntarily, we will have to use other means. You have 30 minutes to gather your essential belongings. You can retrieve the rest later by appointment and in the presence of an officer. The partygoers began to leave. Guests were confused, scared, some still with glasses in their hands. What happened? What's going on? Michelle shouted at them. Stay. Nothing is happening. You'll see this is a mistake. But people left quickly. No one wanted to be there. No one wanted trouble with the police. In 10 minutes, the backyard was empty. Only Robert, Michelle, Caroline, and us remained. Caroline came out of her room. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. She saw me. Grandma! She ran towards me. The social worker tried to stop her, but I shook my head. I let her come. She hugged me around the waist. Please, Grandma, don't let them kick us out. Please. My heart broke into pieces. I knelt down in front of her. My love, this is not your fault. None of this is your fault. But I can't live here with your parents anymore. They hurt me. They injured me. And I have to take care of myself. I have to be safe. But I will take care of you, Grandma. I will protect you. I know. My life. I know. And I love you. I will always love you. But this is something that adults have to resolve. You just have to be a child. You don't have to protect anyone. The social worker approached. She spoke softly. Hello, Caroline. I'm Ms. Sanchez. I'm going to make sure you're okay, that your parents and your grandmother resolve this without it affecting you. It's okay. You're going to be fine. Michelle called her. Caroline, come here now. Don't stay with her. All of this is her fault. Caroline looked at me, confused, scared. Go with your mummy, my love. It's okay. Go. The girl walked slowly towards Michelle. She looked at me twice, as if saying goodbye, as if asking me if I would be okay. I smiled at her, even though it hurt, even though I was dying inside. Robert started packing things. He threw clothes into bags. Michelle was crying. This is not fair. You have no right. We're going to fight this. We're going to get the house back. You'll see. Eleanor, you're going to regret this. Elizabeth responded for me. Any threat will be documented and used against you. I suggest you cooperate and leave peacefully. The 30 minutes passed like a dream, like a movie. Robert and Michelle took clothes, Caroline's toys, a few personal items. Not much. They couldn't take much. Officer Torres supervised everything. She made sure they didn't take anything that wasn't theirs. When they finished, they left. Robert walked past me without looking. Michelle looked at me with pure hatred. This is not over, I swear it. Caroline was crying. Grandma, Grandma, please. They got into their car, the one they had bought with borrowed money, the one they parked in my garage. They drove away. They were gone. Their taillights disappeared at the end of the street. I stood there in the middle of the street, in front of my house, which was finally mine again. Officer Torres handed me the keys. "They're yours, Mrs. Roberts. The house is secured. I recommend you change the locks first thing tomorrow, just in case they made copies." I nodded. I took the keys. They weighed more than I remembered. Or maybe I was the one who felt lighter. Elizabeth reviewed the final papers. I signed where she instructed. "This is temporary, Mrs. Roberts. There will be a hearing in 2 weeks, but with the evidence we have, it is very likely that the eviction will become permanent. They can try to fight it, but I doubt it. Cases like this rarely favor the abuser." "Thank you, attorney, for everything," she smiled. "It's my job, and it's the right thing to do. Take care of yourself. Call me if anything happens, any threats, any unauthorized contact attempt. Everything is documented." The social worker approached. "Mrs. Roberts, I will be monitoring the situation of the minor, Caroline, to ensure she is in a safe environment. If at any time you believe the child is in danger with her parents, notify me. We have options." "I will. Thank you." The officers left, Elizabeth left, the social worker left. Only Dorothy and I remained, standing in front of my house. The backyard was still full of the remnants of the party: plastic cups, empty bottles, plates with half-eaten food, napkins on the ground. The smell of barbecue still hung in the air. "Do you want me to stay with you tonight?" Dorothy asked, worried. "No. I need to be alone. I need to reclaim my space. But thank you for everything. Without you, I couldn't have done this." She hugged me. "You're stronger than you think, Eleanor. You always have been. You just needed to remember it." Dorothy left. I stood in front of the door. My door. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. The sound of the bolt opening was the sweetest sound I had heard in years. I pushed the door. I went in. The house was silent. A deep, heavy silence. But it wasn't the oppressive silence from before. It was a silence of peace, of freedom. I walked through the living room. I ran my hand over the table, over the armchair that had been mine, and that Michelle had moved. I put it back next to the window, where it had always been, where it belonged. I went to the kitchen. There were dirty dishes everywhere, leftovers from the party, bottles on the counter, spilled food. A mess. But it was my mess. My kitchen. My house. I started cleaning. I washed the dishes one by one. I wiped the counter. I swept the floor. I felt every movement, every gesture. I was reclaiming my space. I was erasing their footprints. I went to the master bedroom, the one that had been mine, the one they took from me. Michelle's sheets were still on the bed. Her things were on the dresser: makeup, perfumes, clothes. I took everything off. I put it in bags. I left them in the hallway. They would come to pick them up later, or not. I didn't care. I put on my own sheets, the ones I had kept, clean, white. They smelled of lavender. I sat on the bed, my bed, in my room. I looked out the window at the garden, at the plants, at the darkening sky. Everything was there. Everything was still there. And now it was mine again. I went to the small back room, the one that had been my prison. I took out my few things, my clothes, my medication, Lawrence's photo. I placed it on the nightstand in the master bedroom, next to the bed where it had always been. "Hello, my love. I'm back. I'm home." I spent the next hours cleaning, organizing, reclaiming every corner, every space. I threw away the things Michelle had put up: the horrible decorations, the gaudy cushions, the cheap pictures. I took my things out of the boxes. I put them back in their place, in their proper spot. I cleaned the backyard. I collected all the cups, all the bottles, all the trash from the party that celebrated my absence, the party that ended in the worst possible way for them. I smiled. A bitter smile, but real, deserved. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when I finished. I was exhausted. My whole body ached, but it was a good pain, a pain of work, of recovery. I took a long bath in my bathroom with my hot water, without anyone rushing me, without anyone banging on the door demanding to come in. I put on my favorite pajamas, the ones I hadn't worn in years because Michelle said they looked old. I lay down in my bed, in my room. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I slept in peace. I slept deeply. I slept without fear, without anxiety, without worrying that someone would come in, that someone would yell at me, that someone would hurt me. I woke up with the sun. It came in through the window, through my window. I stretched. I smiled. Today was a new day, the first day of the rest of my life, the first day as the owner of my own house, of my own life, again. But I knew this wasn't over. The real legal battle was just beginning. Robert and Michelle wouldn't give up so easily. They would try to fight. They would try to recover what they believed was theirs by right. And Caroline? My poor Caroline was caught in the middle of all this. I got up, got dressed, and prepared for what was to come. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer fleeing. Now I was the one fighting. And this time, I was going to win. The 2 weeks following the recovery of my house were a whirlwind of legal activity. Elizabeth worked tirelessly, preparing every detail for the hearing that would determine whether the temporary eviction would become permanent. I spent hours in her office reviewing my testimony, checking documents, recalling exact dates and amounts. "You have to be prepared for everything, Eleanor," Elizabeth warned me one afternoon while organizing a mountain of papers. "Robert has hired a lawyer. He's not one of the best, but he will try to discredit you." "How will he do that?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "He'll say you're confused, that your memory is failing, that you misinterpreted his actions. It's the typical strategy in these cases. They'll try to make you look like a paranoid elderly woman who is imagining things." I straightened up in the chair. "I'm 64, not 94. My mind is perfectly clear." Elizabeth smiled. "Exactly how you should answer at the hearing. With firmness, with clarity, no doubts." The day before the hearing, I received an unexpected call. It was Ms. Sanchez, the social worker. "Mrs. Roberts, I need to inform you of something. I've been monitoring Caroline's situation and I'm worried. The girl is showing signs of anxiety and sadness. She says she misses her house, her things, and especially you." My heart sank. "Is she okay? Is she safe with them?" "Physically, she's fine, but emotionally. Robert has been drinking more since the eviction. He hasn't been violent towards the child, but she sees him constantly arguing with Michelle. They're living in a small rented apartment, and the tension is palpable." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling a mix of concern for my granddaughter and anger towards my son for putting her in that situation. "Nothing different for now. Wait for the court ruling. Depending on the outcome, we could request supervised visits or even temporary custody if the situation worsens." I barely slept that night. I thought about Caroline, her scared little face the last time I saw her, and how she hugged me, begging me not to let them get kicked out. I felt torn between the need to protect myself and the desire to protect my granddaughter. The day of the hearing dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky shared my mood. Dorothy came to pick me up early. She had helped me choose an appropriate outfit. A sober navy blue dress, a grey cardigan, comfortable but presentable shoes. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that could make them think I was enjoying this situation. "You look beautiful," she told me as she adjusted the collar of my dress. "Strong and dignified. That's how you should present yourself." The courthouse was an imposing building in downtown Boston. Cold marble, high ceilings, a reverential silence interrupted only by the echo of hurried footsteps and contained murmurs. Elizabeth was waiting for us at the entrance, impeccable in her black suit, leather briefcase in hand. "Ready?" she asked, lightly squeezing my shoulder. "Ready," I replied, although my voice trembled a little. We entered a small but formal courtroom, and there they were, sitting on the other side, Robert and Michelle. My son was wearing a suit I didn't remember seeing before, probably bought for the occasion. Michelle was dressed with unusual sobriety for her, a light grey ensemble that made her look almost respectable. Next to them was a middle-aged man with a bored expression, whom I assumed was their lawyer. Our eyes met for an instant. Robert's eyes, those eyes he had inherited from his father, were dull, dead-looking. Michelle's shone with poorly disguised hatred. I looked away, concentrating on following Elizabeth to our table. Judge Gabriela Montero entered shortly after. She was an older woman than me, perhaps in her 70s, with completely white hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and thin-rimmed glasses that made her eyes look larger and more penetrating. Her expression was neutral, professional, but there was something about her that inspired confidence. The hearing began with the usual formalities. Then Robert's lawyer presented his case. As Elizabeth had predicted, his strategy was to discredit me. My client was simply taking care of his elderly mother, helping her with the finances that she could no longer manage alone. Mr. Roberts has invested considerably in improving the property, significantly increasing its value. This dispute is simply a family misunderstanding, exacerbated by the natural confusion of Mrs. Roberts' advanced age. I felt the blood boil in my veins, but I remained calm, as Elizabeth had advised me. Then it was Elizabeth's turn. She stood up calmly, but there was an intensity in her posture that immediately captured everyone's attention in the room. "Your Honor, this is not a family misunderstanding. It is a clear case of financial and physical abuse against a perfectly capable woman who has been a victim of her own son and daughter-in-law." She proceeded methodically, presenting evidence after evidence. The fraudulent loan with my forged signature, the altered property documents, bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, photographs of my injury after Robert's shove, testimonies from Dorothy and other neighbors about how my life had changed since Robert and Michelle moved in with me. And finally, Your Honor, we have this. Elizabeth played the video that Dorothy's niece had recorded during the party. Michelle's voice echoed clearly in the room. Finally, we got rid of her. Now this house is ours." I watched Michelle shrink in her seat, how the lawyer closed his eyes with a defeated expression. But what struck me the most was Robert's reaction. He was watching the video as if seeing a ghost, as if he didn't recognize his own voice, his own laughter, his own life. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a strange calm. I was no longer afraid. I no longer felt ashamed. I just wanted to tell my truth, plainly and simply. I recounted everything from the beginning, how Lawrence and I built that house brick by brick, how I raised Robert alone after being widowed, how I opened my doors to them when they said they needed temporary help, and then how the abuse began. Subtle at first, then increasingly brazen, until it culminated in physical violence. Robert's lawyer tried to destabilize me during the cross-examination, suggesting that I had voluntarily accepted all the decisions, that I had authorized the loan but had forgotten, that I had fallen accidentally and was unfairly blaming my son. "Sir," I replied with a clarity that surprised even myself, I have sewn wedding dresses for 40 years. My fingers can thread a needle without looking. My mind can calculate yards of fabric and budgets without a calculator. I do not forget things as important as signing a loan for $5,000. I saw a slight smile on Judge Montero's lips. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Robert asked to testify. His lawyer seemed surprised, as if this wasn't in the plan. Michelle looked at him alarmed, pulling his sleeve, but he freed himself with a sharp movement and walked towards the stand. After being sworn in, he remained silent for a few seconds that felt eternal. Then he looked directly at the judge. "Everything my mother has said is true." A murmur swept through the room. Elizabeth tensed beside me. I abused her trust. I forged her signature. I pushed her when she confronted me. I treated her. I treated her in a way that I'm ashamed to remember. Michelle stood up furiously. "Robert, shut up! You don't know what you're saying." "Silence in the court," the judge ordered. "Ma'am, sit down or you will be removed." Michelle sat down, but her face was contorted with fury. Robert continued, now looking directly at me. "Mum, I have no excuse, but I do have an explanation, although I don't expect you to accept it." He paused, took a deep breath. "I have a gambling problem. It started 3 years ago, shortly before we lost our apartment. It wasn't the economic crisis. It was me, betting the rent money, convinced I would get everything back and more. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My son, my Robert, a gambling addict. How did I not see it? When we moved in with you, I thought it would be temporary, truly, but the debts kept growing. The lenders were threatening us. I needed more and more money, and you had it." His voice broke. Michelle knew. At first she tried to stop me, but then she saw the opportunity. "Your mother is old," she would tell me. "Eventually the house will be yours anyway. We're just speeding up the inevitable." I looked at Michelle. Her face was a mask of pure hatred. We started with small things, reorganizing the house, taking control of the bills, then more. Your room, your documents, your money. It became easier and easier to justify it. She doesn't need it. She's confused. It's for her own good. Robert sobbed openly. But deep down, I knew it was wrong. Every time I saw your hurt face, every time you flinched when I walked into a room, a part of me hated myself. I drank to silence that voice. And the more I drank, the more violent I became. The day I pushed you, when I saw the blood, when I saw the terror in Caroline's eyes, I knew I had become a monster, but I was too scared, too ashamed to admit it. So I kept lying. To you, to myself. He wiped his tears with his sleeve. The courtroom was in complete silence. Even the judge seemed shocked by this unexpected confession. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mum. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that this is legitimately your house. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that words aren't enough." Michelle stood up again, this time more controlled, but no less furious. "May I speak, Your Honor?" The judge nodded, still processing what she had just heard. "Everything he has said is a lie," Michelle hissed. "He doesn't have a gambling problem. We didn't forge anything. Eleanor is confused. She always has been. We were taking care of her, and this is how she repays us. If anyone is guilty here, it's him. He was the one who took the money. He was the one who pushed her. I was just trying to keep the family together." Elizabeth stood up. "Your Honor, I believe the statements speak for themselves. Mr. Roberts has admitted the facts. Mrs. Serrano is trying to shift the responsibility without denying what happened." Judge Montero nodded. "I agree, Attorney Vega. I believe I have enough information to make a decision. After a 30-minute recess that felt like an eternity, we returned to the courtroom. Judge Montero had a grave expression as she began to read her resolution. This court finds that Eleanor Roberts is the rightful owner of the dwelling in question, and that she was a victim of financial and physical abuse by the defendants, Robert Roberts and Michelle Serrano. The temporary eviction order is converted to permanent. I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. Furthermore, this court orders a criminal investigation into the fraudulent loan and the document forgery. Mr. Roberts, your confession will be considered in said investigation, but it does not exempt you from possible charges. Robert nodded, crestfallen. As for the minor, Caroline Roberts Serrano, social services will continue to monitor her situation. If the current circumstances pose a risk to her well-being, additional measures will be considered. The judge looked directly at me. Mrs. Roberts, this court recognizes your pain and your courage. You have done the right thing by defending yourself, even if it was against your own son. Sometimes true love means setting firm boundaries. With a bang of the gavel, the hearing ended. Elizabeth briefly hugged me. We did it, Eleanor. We did it. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. Robert looked at me from a distance. There was no longer fury in his eyes. Only defeat. Only shame. Michelle was crying, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. I was glad Caroline wasn't there to see this. I returned to my house, my legal, official, permanently mine house. I sat in my armchair by the window. I looked at the garden. I took a deep breath. I had done it. I had recovered my life. I had recovered my dignity. I had recovered my home. The days after the hearing were a strange limbo. On the one hand, I experienced an intoxicating freedom. I could move around my house without fear, use my things, cook when I wanted, sleep without worries. On the other hand, I felt an inexplicable emptiness, as if the constant tension of the last few years had left a void that I didn't know how to fill. Dorothy came to visit me daily. It's normal, she would tell me while we shared tea in the garden. You've been in survival mode for so long that now you don't know how to just live. Little by little, I began to reclaim every inch of my house, not just physically but emotionally. I painted the walls fresh colors. I rearranged the furniture. I planted new flowers in the garden. Every action was an act of affirmation. This is mine. This is my choice. This reflects who I am. The most significant change I made was in the room that had been Caroline's. For days, I kept the door closed, unable to face the memories. Finally, with Dorothy's help, I emptied the room, donating the toys and clothes that Robert and Michelle had left behind. But I saved some special items in a box. The teddy bear Caroline hugged to sleep, the storybook we read together, the scarf I knitted for her last winter. Do you think I'll see her again? I asked Dorothy as I carefully closed the box. Time will tell, friend. Time will tell. I resumed my sewing work with renewed enthusiasm. My old clients returned, and soon word spread that Eleanor was back in business. Some had heard rumors about what had happened. The story had leaked, as it does in small neighborhoods. To my surprise, instead of looks of pity, I received expressions of respect. My sister went through something similar, a client confessed to me while I took her measurements for a party dress. I wish she had your courage, Eleanor. My financial situation began to improve. Without having to support 3 additional people, my savings grew again. I allowed myself small luxuries, a new television, better quality curtains, even some sessions with a physical therapist for the back pain that had bothered me for years. One afternoon, Elizabeth called me with news. The prosecutor has decided to file charges against Robert for the fraudulent loan. she informed me. There isn't enough direct evidence against Michelle, although it is clear that she was an accomplice. I felt a confusing mix of emotions. On one hand, justice. On the other, a mother's pain. Will he go to jail? I asked with a trembling voice. It's possible, but I don't think so. As it's his first offense and he confessed voluntarily, he will probably receive a suspended sentence, conditioned on treatment for his gambling addiction and financial restitution. And Caroline? Elizabeth paused. Ms. Sanchez has contacted me. She's worried. Robert and Michelle are having difficulties. He's lost several temporary jobs, it seems because he shows up drunk. Michelle is working double shifts at a shopping mall, which means Caroline spends a lot of time alone, or with neighbours. My heart sank. Can I do something? Can I see her? In fact, we are considering requesting supervised visits. They would be at a neutral centre with a social worker present. Are you interested? Of course I'm interested, I replied without hesitation. She's my granddaughter. I love her. 2 weeks later, I found myself in an antiseptic room at a family services centre, nervous as a teenager on her first date. Ms. Sanchez had explained the rules. The visit would last 1 hour. She would be present the whole time. We couldn't discuss the legal case or speak ill of her parents. When the door opened and Caroline entered, I gasped. She looked thinner, paler. Her hair, which I used to brush until it shone, was dull and poorly cut. But her eyes, those eyes that reminded me so much of Lawrence, lit up when she saw me. Grandma! She ran to me and threw herself into my arms with such force that I almost lost my balance. I hugged her tightly, breathing in her scent, feeling her small body tremble with contained sobs. My girl, my little one, I murmured against her hair. I've missed you so much. The hour passed in a sigh. Caroline told me about her new school, her few new friends, her small and noisy new apartment. She avoided talking about her parents, and I didn't ask, respecting the rules. We played with toys the centre provided. I read her a book. I combed her hair with my fingers, promising to fix it better next time when Ms. Sanchez announced that our time was up. Caroline clung to me. I don't want to go, Grandma. I want to go home with you. I know, my love, I know. But for now, we have to follow the rules. I promise we'll see each other soon. The visit established a pattern. Every 2 weeks, I spent an hour with Caroline. Each time, I noticed small changes, more neglected clothes, dark circles under her eyes, a sadness that no 9-year-old should carry. During one of these visits, while we were colouring together, Caroline suddenly dropped her pencil. Daddy cries a lot, she said softly, looking at the drawing. And not at me. At night, when he thinks I'm asleep, he says your name sometimes. I didn't know what to answer. Ms. Sanchez, sitting discreetly in a corner, gave me a warning look. Sometimes adults get sad, honey, I replied carefully. Like when you feel bad after doing something you know isn't right. Caroline nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. Mommy is angry all the time. She yells at Daddy. She says it's all his fault. I felt a pang of concern. Does she yell at you too? Caroline shook her head. Not much. She's hardly ever home. She works a lot. The lady in apartment 3B watches me after school. I looked at Ms. Sanchez, who was discreetly writing in her notebook. Later, as I accompanied Caroline to the exit where Michelle would be waiting for her, the social worker stopped me for a moment. This confirms our concerns, she murmured. The situation is not ideal. We will continue monitoring. That night, as I watered the plants in my garden under the starry Boston sky, I thought about my fragmented family. My son, broken by his own bad decisions. My daughter-in-law, bitter and resentful. My granddaughter, caught between all this adult pain. And me, finally free, but still chained by love and worry. Lawrence, I whispered to the stars, imagining that my husband could hear me. What should I do? How can I fix this? Of course, the stars didn't answer, but I felt a strange peace enveloping me, as if Lawrence were there, reminding me that some things we cannot control. We can only accept them and move forward the best we can. That night, I made a decision. Regardless of what happened with Robert and Michelle, I would be there for Caroline. I would be her rock, her safe haven. And if she ever needed more than bi-weekly visits, I would be ready to offer her a home. Fall arrived in Boston with gentle rain and cooler temperatures. My garden was beginning to prepare for winter. The flowers gradually disappeared, giving way to a different, more sober kind of beauty. One Sunday afternoon, while preparing a chili, I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting visitors. Dorothy was visiting her sister in New York, and my clients never came on Sunday. I opened the door and froze. It was Robert. He was almost unrecognizable. He had lost weight, a lot of weight. His clothes hung on his body as if they belonged to someone bigger. He had a few days' growth of beard, but it wasn't a well-kept beard, but the result of neglect. His eyes, sunken in dark circles, reflected a deep tiredness. "Mom," he said in a hoarse voice. I remained silent, my hand gripping the doorknob tightly, ready to close it if necessary. "I haven't come to cause you trouble," he quickly added, noticing my defensive posture. "I just wanted to talk. 5 minutes. Please." I hesitated. The last time we were alone, he had pushed me against a wall. The last time I trusted him, he almost left me homeless. But something in his expression, a genuine desperation, made me step back. 5 minutes. In the garden. I didn't invite him inside. Not yet. I led him around the side of the house to the backyard, where the apple trees that Lawrence had planted 30 years ago now shaded a small table and chairs set. We sat down. The silence was uncomfortable, heavy with decades of shared history and recent betrayals. "You look good, Mum," he finally said. "The house looks good too. Did you come to talk about the state of my house?" He shook his head. "No, I'm in treatment for my gambling addiction. I've been in it for 2 months." I looked at him in surprise. It was the last thing I expected to hear. "Part of my recovery is making amends with the people I've hurt," he continued, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "I've made a list. You're at the top, of course." "Robert, no, please, let me finish. I need to say this. What I did to you is unforgivable. I know, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to change, to be better. Not for you, not even for Caroline, although both are important reasons. I'm doing it for me." I remained silent, processing his words. Part of me desperately wanted to believe him. Another part warned me to be careful, that I had been fooled before. "Where is Michelle?" I finally asked. Robert's expression clouded over. "We've separated. She couldn't handle my recovery. Or maybe I couldn't handle her resentment. Probably both." "And Caroline?" "She's with Michelle most of the time. I see her on weekends when I can, when Michelle allows it." This explained why I hadn't seen Robert during the pickups after my supervised visits. "Mum, there's something else I need to confess." He leaned forward, nervously rubbing his hands. "I have debts, many debts, to dangerous lenders. It's part of what led me to do what I did." "Why are you telling me this now? Do you need money?" My voice tensed. Distrust instantly resurfaced. "No," he exclaimed, almost horrified. "No, I don't want your money. Never again." In fact, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I've been working double shifts at a warehouse. It's not much, but it's a start." He handed me the envelope. Inside were $500 and a handwritten promissory note, promising to repay the rest of the fraudulent loan in monthly installments. "I know it's barely a fraction of what I owe you, not just financially, but emotionally, but it's a start, a commitment." I looked at the money, then at my son, the man I had given birth to, raised, loved unconditionally, the man who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, the man who now sat in front of me, broken, but trying to rebuild. "Your therapist suggested this, didn't they?" He nodded. "Yes, but I wanted to do it. I needed to do it. For me as much as for you." I folded the promissory note and gave it back to him, but I kept the money. "I don't need a written promise, Robert. Your word should be enough. If it isn't, no paper will fix it." He seemed to understand the weight of what I was saying. He put the paper back in his pocket. "There's something else," he added after a moment. "Ms. Sanchez told me that you see Caroline regularly." "Yes, twice a month. Supervised visits." "That's good. She needs you. She misses you a lot." He paused. "In fact, Ms. Sanchez suggested that perhaps, if you agree, and after a reasonable time, we could modify the arrangement. Allow longer visits. Maybe even have Caroline stay with you some weekends." My heart sped up. Would Michelle agree to that? Robert frowned. "Honestly, I don't know. But it's not just her decision, and Ms. Sanchez is worried about the environment Caroline is in right now." I didn't say anything, but my mind was already planning how to redecorate Caroline's room, what meals I would prepare, what books we would read together. "Your 5 minutes are up," I finally said, but without the harshness I had initially planned. Robert stood up. "Thank you for listening to me, Mum. I didn't expect so much." I walked him to the door. As he turned to leave, something prompted me to ask, "Where are you living now?" He shrugged. "In a shelter temporarily. It's part of the program. Complete detox from gambling, alcohol, toxic relationships, starting over." I looked at him for a long time, this man who was both my little boy and a stranger. "If you need a place to be, to talk, my door is open. Not to live, not yet, maybe never, but to visit, to rebuild, little by little." His expression briefly lit up, as if a ray of sunshine had pierced dense clouds. "Thank you, Mum. It means more than I can express." I watched him walk away down the street, his solitary figure hunched against the autumnal wind. I didn't feel forgiveness, not completely, but I felt something else. Hope. A fragile hope that perhaps with time and effort, some kind of relationship could be salvaged from the ashes of what we had lost. That night, I called Elizabeth to tell her about Robert's visit. "Do you think he's sincere?" I asked her, still unsure of my own feelings. "It's difficult to know for sure," she replied carefully. "Addiction is a complex disease, and recovery is rarely a straight path. There will be relapses. There will be struggles. So I should keep him away." "I didn't say that." She paused. "Eleanor, you know your son better than anyone. Trust your instincts, but protect your boundaries. You can support his recovery without sacrificing your emotional or financial security." Her words resonated with me. For so long I had oscillated between extremes, blind trust or total rejection. Perhaps there was a middle path, a cautious, vigilant, but not paranoid, openness. Support without unconditional surrender. It is possible to love someone and still not trust them completely, Elizabeth continued, as if reading my thoughts. Forgiveness does not mean allowing them to hurt you again. Wise words, I murmured. Not mine, she said, from my own therapist, after what happened with my mother and my brother. I smiled, despite the seriousness of the moment. It seems we all need help navigating these complicated family relationships. That's life, Eleanor. No one has all the answers. We just try to do the best we can with the cards we've been dealt. 3 months after Robert's visit, my life had found a new rhythm. My sewing business was thriving. I had even hired an assistant, Lucy, a young Colombian immigrant with a talent for embroidery. The visits with Caroline had become more frequent, increasing from 2 hours bi-weekly to entire afternoons every week. The big change occurred one cold morning in January, when Ms. Sanchez called me with news that took my breath away. Mrs. Roberts, a situation has arisen with Caroline. Michelle was arrested last night for driving under the influence of alcohol with the child in the car. My God, is Caroline okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, she is very distraught. She is currently with a temporary foster family, but I thought that you… Yes, I replied before she could finish. Of course, yes. When can I pick her up? 6 hours later, Caroline walked into my house with a small backpack and eyes swollen from crying. This time, it wasn't a supervised visit. It was a temporary stay while Michelle's capacity for maintaining custody was determined. Can I stay in my old room? She asked timidly. Of course, my life. In fact, there's something I want to show you. I took her to the room that was once hers. I had completely redesigned it. New sky blue curtains, a bigger bed with a star quilt, a small desk for her homework, shelves with age-appropriate books, and on the nightstand, the box I had kept with her treasures. My things, she exclaimed, opening the box in awe. You saved my things? Of course I did. I always knew you would come back, one way or another. She hugged me tightly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that something fundamental in the universe was back in its correct place. The following weeks, we established a routine, quiet breakfasts, before taking her to her new school closer to my house, afternoons of homework and reading, dinners where we talked about our day. Caroline blossomed before my eyes, regaining the colour in her cheeks, the light in her gaze. Robert came twice a week. At first, our encounters were tense, supervised. Gradually, as he demonstrated his sobriety and commitment to his recovery, the visits became more relaxed. The three of us sometimes had dinner together, like a strange, reconfigured version of a family. One day, while Caroline was at school, Robert was helping me fix a leaky pipe under the sink. We worked in silence, he inside the cabinet, me passing him tools. This reminds me of when Dad taught me how to do repairs, he commented, his voice muffled by the confined space. He always said a man should know how to take care of his home. Your father valued independence, I replied, surprised by the shared memory. But also teamwork. Alone we do little, together we do a lot, he used to say. Robert came out of the cabinet, wiping his hands on a rag. I miss him, you know. Sometimes I wonder what he would have thought of all this. He would be disappointed, I said honestly, but also proud to see you trying to correct your mistakes. He nodded, accepting the hard truth along with the comfort. You know, I've been thinking about starting my own business, he said after a moment. Something small, a home repair service. I have a knack for it, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a warehouse. That sounds like a good plan. The problem is the startup funds. With my debts and the money I still owe you, I tensed immediately. Was this the moment when everything started over? The request for money, The promises, the cycle of abuse? Robert noticed my reaction. No, Mum, I'm not asking you for anything. In fact, I wanted to tell you that I've applied for a small loan at the bank with my current job as collateral. Completely legitimate, completely transparent. I felt relief, but also a pang of guilt for doubting so quickly. I'm glad, Robert. I really hope it works out. Me too. He paused. And I wanted you to know that I'm still paying my debts, the legitimate ones and the ones I have to you. He had been faithfully depositing small amounts into my account every month, as he promised. I know, I see it. I appreciate it. That day marked a turning point. It wasn't total forgiveness, it wasn't forgetting, but it was a kind of peace, a recognition that we were both trying to rebuild something from the rubble of our relationship. As for Michelle, her story took a different turn. After her arrest, she was forced to attend an alcohol treatment program. She maintained supervised visits with Caroline, but they were tense and often ended in tears. Unlike Robert, Michelle never truly accepted responsibility. She always blamed others, Robert, me, the system, bad luck. 6 months after Caroline came to live with me, the family court reviewed the case. Judge Montero, the same one who had presided over our previous case, listened to Ms. Sanchez's reports, the testimonies of Caroline's teachers about her academic and emotional improvement, and the psychological evaluations of everyone involved. This court grants temporary custody of Caroline Roberts Serrano to her grandmother, Eleanor Roberts, for an initial period of 1 year, subject to review, she ruled. The parents, Robert Roberts and Michelle Serrano, will maintain visitation rights under the conditions specified in this document. We left the courthouse, Caroline holding my hand firmly. We didn't jump for joy or celebrate openly. We both understood the complexity of the moment, a victory for her well-being, but also the formal recognition of her parents' failure to adequately protect her. "Does this mean I can stay with you forever?" she asked as we walked home. "It means you will stay with me as long as it is best for you," I replied carefully. "And that we will all work together so that someday your daddy, and maybe even your mummy, can be well enough to take care of you the way you deserve." She nodded, processing this with a maturity beyond her years. "I like living with you, Grandma. I feel safe. And I love having you with me, my life. My house is much more of a home when you are in it." That night, after putting Caroline to bed, I sat in the garden under the stars, in the same spot where Lawrence and I used to share a beer after Robert fell asleep. "We've come a long way, my love," I whispered to his memory. "Not as we planned, not as we expected. But we are here. I am here. Stronger than I ever imagined I could be." My phone vibrated with a message. It was from Dorothy. "How are you feeling, warrior?" I smiled. Peaceful. Not perfect, but peaceful. As I contemplated the night sky, I reflected on everything I had learned in these last turbulent years. That true love sometimes means setting painful boundaries. That strength doesn't always look the way we imagine. That it's never too late to reclaim your power, your space, your life. That families can break and rebuild in new and unexpected ways. And above all, that I, Eleanor Roberts, a 65-year-old seamstress from Boston, had a resilience inside me that I never knew I possessed. The next day, driven by this new clarity, I did something I had been considering for months. I called several women in the neighborhood, women my age or older, women who had experienced their own struggles with adult children, with abusive partners, with systems that seemed to ignore them. I invited them over for coffee in my garden. 7 came. I told them my whole story, without shame, without filters. they told theirs. We cried together. We laughed together. We recognized ourselves in each other's experiences. "We should do this regularly," suggested Mary, a 70-year-old widow who had been struggling to prevent her son-in-law from selling the house she shared with her daughter. "Like a support group," added Carol, 68, whose children barely visited her but always called when they needed money. "More than that," I said, surprising myself with the strength of my conviction. "A circle of wisdom, a place where we share not just our problems but our solutions, where we help each other be strong, stand up for ourselves, and reclaim the respect we deserve." That's how the Matriarchs of Boston was born, our small group that soon grew to 20 members, then 30. We met weekly, alternating houses. We shared legal resources, contacts for trusted professionals, strategies for handling difficult situations, and most importantly, the validation that our experiences mattered, that our voices deserved to be heard. 1 year after recovering my house, my life was almost unrecognizable compared to what it had been. Caroline was thriving under my care, becoming a confident and curious child. Robert, sober for 15 months, was slowly starting to build his small business. Michelle remained a distant and often problematic presence, but we had established clear boundaries that even she respected most of the time. My sewing business prospered, now with a specialization in custom bridal gowns that allowed me to charge higher rates for my expertise. The Matriarchs had become a local institution. We had even been interviewed by a regional newspaper. And I, Eleanor Roberts, the woman who once fled her own house, bleeding and terrified, now stood tall. In my home, in my life, in my power. Every night before sleeping, I whispered the same words to Lawrence's photograph on my nightstand. "I did it, my love. I recovered our house. I recovered our dignity. I recovered our family, though in ways we never would have imagined. And above all, I recovered myself. And that, in the end, was the sweetest victory of all."